So the other day I was doing a live stream on the Amiga and we were just doing some stuff in the shell just to try and make a file and edit it, and I couldn't remember some of the commands. So I thought, maybe it's time for have a little refresher of AmigaDOS, because I haven't really been using AmigaDOS or the shell for 30 years properly. Been using PCs and DOS and stuff like that. So I thought it might be nice to have a quick refresher and go through the actual using the Amiga Workbench manual, which has got a section on AmigaDOS, and we could just have a look at some of the commands that we can do in here, and go through them and just try and jog our memories on how the hell we use this thing again. So it's just got a quick introduction there. AmigaDOS stands for Amiga Disk Operating System. It's for accessing files, etc., etc. And this chapter will tell us how to run the shell and stuff as well. You can communicate the AmigaDOS with commands, so that's like the stuff on the shell. So I think, where have they hidden it in? They actually the shell used to be here on the old workbench, but they've put it now in system. I always forget. So the shell's just there. I don't know if there's a shortcut to open that, but basically, yeah, that's the shell there, and we can do dir. So that's the same as the DOS command. That's why I can kind of remember that. So that's just listing out a directory. The main unit of storage is a device such as a floppy disk. Some systems may use hard disk or whatever, or magnetic tapes. Yeah, right. Each device is assigned a name by the system, such as DF0 for the Amiga's internal floppy drive. So that'll be drive floppy 0, and RAM with a colon for the RAM disk. So if I type DF0 with the semicolon, that is actually the floppy drive. So I've just typed DF0, so that's the device, but it actually says Abyss, and that's because I've got the tiny bubble disk in there, and it's made by these people called Abyss. So that's actually, I think it covers that next. It actually says that you have a volume name. When you refer to a floppy drive by device name, that particular drive is assigned regardless of the disk inside. So it says another way to access the disk is by volume name, like the name that appears under the disk's icon. So yeah, we've actually got the disk name there, Abyss, and it's saying that we can refer to it by its volume name as well. When you refer to a disk by volume name, the system will search all the available drives for that disk. If it cannot find the disk of that name, a request will appear asking you to insert the disk. If I take this disk out, I've just popped the disk out, and I do Abyss, like that. Yeah, there you go. It's asking me to insert it into any drive. I'll pop it back in, and then I'll do... Oh, it's just going to retry on its own because it knows about the disk. That's totally fine. So basically what we learned from that is device names and volume names have just the colon after it. It actually says that next. Device and volume names must be followed by a colon. There are some peripheral devices, PAR, SER for serial port, etc., etc. So I won't go through those now. Then it says directories are the AmigaDOS version of the drawers on the workbench. Directories allow you to group and classify related files together. So they are called directories in AmigaDOS, but they're actually called drawers when you work with them on the UI. So that's a bit odd. If you create an empty file on disk, the file is in the root directory. So it's saying directories can contain subdirectories. Subdirectories are like drawers within drawers. They are just one more way of organizing information. So let's just... Does it actually tell? It doesn't actually tell us the command to actually make one there yet. Workbench directories are assigned using the AmigaDOS assign command to logical device names such as C:, system:, and utilities:. So you can actually assign a directory to a device name, etc. Application programs often need to access files in these directories, and this standardizes the way applications can look for the directories by looking for the device name of C:. The actual C directory does not have to be on a specific disk. This gives you more flexibility where you store your files. For instance, the Workbench 2 fonts directory is normally assigned to the device name fonts. So let's just see if that's true. Let's go to fonts. Oh, there you go. So yeah, Workbench fonts. So that device name isn't really a real device. It's just assigned to this directory on the actual partition, which is just on my hard drive in this one. So we can do that with assign. So there's an assign command. Oh, there you go. Devices are CF0, RAM, CON, RAW, pipe. Oh, and it's telling me all the things that are assigned there. Can I make this bigger or not? Yes, I can. But I can't scroll it. That's not possible. So yeah, RAM disk, clipboards, environment, Workbench C is assigned to C. So there we go. So that's pretty good. It then goes on to say a file is the basic unit of storage. On the Workbench, files are represented by tool and project icons. Yeah, so Workbench is a bit weird in that it calls files projects. But again, in AmigaDOS, they're called files. So I always thought it was really confusing that AmigaDOS is calling them one thing and Workbench is calling them another. And it's calling them a thing that nobody ever called them. I don't know if anybody ever called a file a project, but you know, you might have a project in a file, but I don't know. The icons themselves are represented by .info files pronounced .info. Every file or directory else has an icon, has a .info file. The info file contains the graphics and position data for the icon, as well as the default tool. So that's interesting. So in Workbench, the .info file actually is not just the icon, it's actually telling it how to open the program. So whereas something like Windows, that's like stored in like the registry somewhere. Paths. When using the shell, you do not have to type the names of the files you want to access. To do this properly, you must specify, or you have to type the names of the files you want to access. To do this properly, you must specify the complete path to a file. The complete path consists of a device or volume name followed by a colon. All the directories leading to the file are separated by slashes, and that's forward slashes, not backslashes. And then finally the file name. So it's device colon directory subdirectory. So let's just try that. So we can access a file. What have we got here? We've got Topaz that's in there. So the full thing would be Workbench fonts / oh, Topaz is also a directory. So that's actually that folder, or that directory I should say. Can I do a dir on that? Oh yeah, and there's Topaz 11 that's inside there, so that's the file. So the full file is actually that one. So Workbench is the device name, fonts is the folder, / Topaz, that's another folder, and 11 is the file. Unknown data type. So it doesn't know what to do with that 11, but that's that file there. So we're specifying the paths with the / and the devices with the colon. So it says, for example, the path to the clock file in utilities is workbench2 /utilities /clock. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's the clock. So the clock just popped up. So that's still there in 3.2. Like this is a manual for Workbench 2. So I got that path there, and I launched the clock. It knew how to launch that. Naming the files. The files you choose for files and directories can be 30 characters long. You should not use colons, semicolons, asterisks, slashes, or question marks, back apostrophes, pound signs in names. These characters are explained in the special AmigaDOS character section. Any other letters or punctuation symbols are allowed, and I think that actually includes the backslash. You can put a backslash in a file name, which I made that mistake the other day. The Amiga file system is case indifferent. I just showed that there because Workbench has got a capital W there, and I used it without that. If you use uppercase letters in your names, they will appear on the screen, but you do not have to type them in to access the file. So you can just try that with the clock there. If I just put a capital S there, the clock still launches. So it's case insensitive. That's kind of like Windows as well. If you're used to Linux or Unix, that's not case insensitive. So that's where this differs. It says you should avoid spaces in file names. If the name contains spaces, the complete path of the file must be enclosed in double quotes. Okay, so it's saying I could double quote this this path here like this, and if it did have spaces in, that would work. I reached my end key there. We don't have an end key on the Amiga. So yeah, so that still works. So that's how you'd quote. That's how you quote it if you've got spaces in your file name, which I don't have in this. Be especially careful not to put space at the beginning or the end. Yep. Many AmigaDOS commands use special keywords that identify the argument or specific option of the command. For instance, the list command, which displays the contents of a directory, has a files keyword to limit the display to files only. Oh, okay. So if we look at Workbench, do list. So there's some directories there, or are there any files? I could do list files. Oh, that just shows me the files. That's very nice. But it's saying if there is a space in that, if there happens to be a space in that extra command there, whoops, happens to be a space in that extra command, then you can quote that as well. Oh no, is that not right? I don't know what it's saying there. If you have a conflict between a file and directory name and a keyword, enclosing the name in quotes to ensure it is interpreted correctly. Well, it didn't interpret that correctly because it didn't understand it. Unless you're saying that just makes sure that it knows that it's a folder, and I'm not trying to specify a folder there, or I'm trying to specify the command. So then it's going on about commands. There are two types of AmigaDOS commands, disk-based and internal. Every time a disk-based command is invoked, the command must be loaded from Workbench to boot the system. Yeah, you'll know about that if you're running from floppy disk. Most disk-based commands are stored in the C directory, C standing for commands, I assume. If the disk is not currently in the disk drive, it must be inserted. Yeah, there you go. You'll get that if you're trying to use Workbench 1.3 with one floppy drive. The internal commands are built into the shell, which is stored in ROM. When internal command is invoked, the system can access it immediately. It does not have to be read from disk. Many of the AmigaDOS commands parallel menu items or programs on the Workbench. However, it is often quicker and more convenient to perform these actions through typed commands, though some people simply prefer typing to using the mouse. There you go. Who'd want to use the mouse? Sometimes it is a lot easier to do stuff like this. It tells me how to get to the shell, which we've already done. You enter it by commands with a text prompt. Usually, you must press return at the end of each command. Yeah, we know that. This is quite an in-depth manual, because this is kind of written for like the 1991 user that might not have used the computer very much, and you're trying to learn how to actually navigate this actual, command window. If you'd come from the Commodore 64, you wouldn't have done stuff like this, and you'd not owned any other computer. Like if you from the PC days now, and people who've had DOS, you would know this, but a lot of people actually nowadays maybe have never used a computer like this. You can also execute AmigaDOS commands from the Workbench without opening a shell window. The execute command item on the Workbench menu. Where is that? Workbench. There is no execute command. Oh, there is execute command, Amiga E. Oh, look at that. So you can just, without opening a shell, you can just do a command there. There you go. I've probably never used that. Getting information about disk. This is the bit that we've just kind of done. The next three steps illustrate the dir, list, and info commands. Three most common commands. The dir command generates a list of files and directories included on disk within a directory. So that is just dir. Let me just get the right window. It's just dir. Dir. Okay, we got a directory. When a name is followed by dir, it is a directory. Okay, yeah, it's just telling me those, like system dir, that's a directory. And then it's saying you can type in for a specific directory. So I could just look at what's in the RAM. So that's without going to that folder, I can just look at what's in the RAM or that device. If you want more information about the files and directories on the disk, use the list command. You'll see the same information generated by dir, but it's just got more information. It will contain the file sizes, the protection bits for both files and directories, and the date and time for the files. The possible protection bits for a file are listed as S for script, P is for pure. I haven't got any of those here. A has been archived. There we go. R is readable. We've got that. W is writable. E is can be executed, and D is can be deleted. So that's what that R wed thing is there. If a protection bit is set, the appropriate letter is shown. This message means the bit is on. You can use list to get information about a specific file. So if I do tools.info, I can get information on tools.info. There it is, just that file. To get more general information about your system, you can use the info command. Info displays a list of all the disks that are currently available to the system. There we go, that's what I've got in my system. Yeah, that seems about right. Read only name Abyss. That's quite a good one. CF0, there's a compact flash plugged in at the moment. There it is, a SanDisk compact flash. I've got an unformatted partition there, not a DOS disk. There's the RAM disk. Yeah, so that totally works. So, creating a new directory. This is the bit that I fell over when I did my live stream. It's MakeDir. So let's go to the RAM disk. Let's make... Now I think, actually, if you don't know a command, I think you can tab, and it tries to help you out. But if you do that on the floppy disk, it'll start searching all the commands for one that you've got to. So I just typed make and then space, and it's MakeDir. It's like MKDIR in DOS, so that's where I got confused. So I can make a directory. I'll call it my folder. They're not called folders here, they're called directories, but I can do that. And there it is. I made... where's my folder on there? My folder, there it is. It was made today. Apparently it's 3:15, which is not the time, because I haven't got a battery backed up clock in this computer. So to create an icon, you can make a copy of the .info file for any existing drawer icon by copying the expansion info file. What's this? So there's my RAM disk. So it doesn't appear because it doesn't, anything that doesn't have an info file won't actually appear in here. So I've made that folder, but it doesn't actually work. You can copy the icon for the expansion drawer by copying the expansion.info file. To do this, you can use the copy command. You must be sure to specify both the name of the file you are copying, the source file, and the name of the destination. Copy expansion.info. Now I don't know if I've got access to this from somewhere. That might be expecting that to be in the workbench folder. We'll find out that in a minute. And it was we'll copy it to my folder.info. Let's just see if that, so it didn't find that. I think that is on the workbench. I think that's on the workbench partition maybe. Okay, yeah. So I've copied that there. What has that really done? This makes a copy of the expansion info file and calls it, well, myfolder.info I've called it. There will now be a tester draw icon in the workbench to window. So in my case, I've put this in the RAM disk. I'm not seeing anything there yet. If I reopen that, does that? Oh, there it is. There we go. So I've given myself a little folder that works in workbench. There we go, and that's my folder with nothing in it. Excellent. So yeah, without that .info file, you're not going to get anything. So that's something that's kind of a quirk of Workbench, I suppose. If you did something like this on Microsoft Windows, you would get the folder straight away. So it says, when creating icons for new files or directories, be sure to copy the icon of the same type, drawer, project, or tool. Otherwise, you could have problems when you try to open the file from Workbench. So, changing the current directory. There are times when you have to perform several operations within a directory. So I'm in RAM disk right now. As you can see it down here, it's saying I'm in RAM disk. So that's the shell's current directory. The current directory is AmigaDOS reference point, similar to Workbench's active drawer window. Any given time the shell, there is always one directory that's the current directory. There are two ways to think about the current directory. The path up to and including the current directory is assumed and does not need to be included in the path to a particular file. The current directory is the default directory. The AmigaDOS will work within that directory if none is specified. So it's saying to move into my folder I just made, I can go CD for change directory, my folder. That is exactly the same way you do it on DOS if you used to DOS or the Windows shell thing there. There should be nothing in there. Yeah, there's nothing. Regardless of the current directory setting, you can still refer to a file in any other directory by giving it the full path. The current directory will not change unless you enter the CD command. The shell also supports the concept of an implied CD. You can CD to directory by typing the name of directory at the prompt. The shell will look through the search path for that name. And that's kind of what I was doing before. So I think, just like DOS, I think you could do CD. Can you do CD dot like that? Nope, I don't know how you go back. So what it's saying is, if I want to go into my folder, I don't have to type CD. I can just type my folder. And it just knew to do that. So I didn't even need to type the CD. It just knew that if I was putting in a folder name, it was just going to go there. And it will look through the search path for a command of that name. The search path is an ordered set of paths of AmigaDOS that examines to find the command. If it does not find a command of that name to execute, it would automatically CD to that directory. Okay, so if you happen to have a folder that's got the same name as a command, that wouldn't work. So you can just type in the name of a folder and it will go there. AmigaDOS will search forward in the directory structure. There you go. Just as changing the current directory can save you from having to type the full path, so can adding directories to the search path. The current directory is always at the beginning of the search path and the C: directory is always at the end. So several of the search directories are usually added to the search path in the startup sequence, the file that is executed each time the Amiga is booted. The standard startup sequence adds the system, utilities, prefs, and S directories as well as the RAM disk to the default search path. AmigaDOS will automatically look in these directories in sequence to locate a program to execute. If the file is not found in those directories, the object not found message will be displayed. You can add any directory you like to the search path with the path command. Adding a directory to the search path eliminates the need to supply a path to the program. You need to simply need to enter the file name and AmigaDOS will find it. For instance, if you frequently use a program called spell in the directory words on a disk called English, you could add the English words directory to your search path. Normally, if you wanted to see the spell command, you would have to specify the complete path. English : words - spell. If you have an extra drive in your system, you would need to keep the English disk in that drive. Okay, so basically it's saying I can add a path to something. So I can even add a path to, I can add a path, well, they're typing them in uppercase just to show that they're a thing, but you could have ram my folder like that, I think, and that would actually add, yeah, that would add this folder here to my actual search paths, and it would get searched even if I'm not in that folder right now, even if I'm, say, in the root or somewhere else in Workbench. It's now going to search that, it's going to search that folder, that ram my folder, for actual commands to run when you type the name of a command. So yeah, the startup sequence will probably have some of those in there. Well, it will have some of those in there. If you enter the path command shell window, the new search path only applies to that shell. Oh, so that one there, this one I've entered here, is going to be temporary. It will only apply until I close this shell. To permanently add a directory to the search path, you must specify in the user startup or shell startup files. Editing these files is explained later on. If you have two or more commands with the same name in different directories in your search path, AmigaDOS will execute the first one found. So it's based in order. So working with files. So here's another one. So you can, so far your directory is empty. So I've made this new folder or directory and it's empty. To get a file, you're going to need to work with, we're going to copy the startup sequence into the S directory. So it recommends, here's the thing. So it's actually called copy is the name of the command. So it's asking me for arguments. So it reckons I can copy if this is still in the same place, sys startup sequence, and I'm going to copy it into my RAM disk, my folder, this one. Now, I didn't actually say it did anything, so let's have a look. Now remember, I don't have to type CD. There it is. There's my startup sequence. It's that I've copied into my new folder that I made. And it does say do dir to make sure it works, and I just did that. Some common commands you can then use to working on your files are copy, type, rename, delete. You've already used the copy command. The type command lets you look at the contents of a file. So let's have a look at that. Type startup sequence. So, oh, there you go. That's my copy of it. Let's take this to the back. So, oh, there's the path command. You can see that's it putting all those paths in. Text may scroll rather quickly. If you press the spacebar, the text will pause. To start the text scrolling again, press backspace. That's interesting. Oh yeah, you can just stop it and backspace like that. There we go. That's pretty cool. To change the name of a file, it is rename. So let's have a look what we got in here. So we're called startup sequence. We can do rename. Let's specify the full thing just so I don't rename my own startup sequence. So I'm tabbing there to get the extra, to finish the word for me. I'll rename that to let's just rename it to user startup, because that's one of the other kind of files you can do. So again, it's going to put it back in that same folder. There you go. Now it's called user startup. Excellent. So it's renamed to rename file, and to delete the file from the disk, use the delete command, type delete. So it's just delete, and I'm going to specify the full path, even though I don't have to, just so I don't accidentally delete my own user startup. There you go. So I'm going to delete that. It says it's deleted. I'll list again, and it's saying the directory is empty again. That is great. Well, you cannot delete the directory that you are working in, so you'll have to change directory CD to a higher level. Okay, so in this case, the original Workbench root directory, the slash tells the command to move up. Okay, so that's what I was doing wrong. So in DOS or Windows, you do that to move up one, but it's saying here I actually do a backslash. Is it? Do I do a backslash or a forward slash? I do a forward slash. I don't think it uses the backslashes. So that moves up one. So let me just try that. Let's just make a folder within a folder, and let's make sure it's moving up. So let's make another directory in there. Make a directory. It's directory 2. Let's go into that one. Okay. So it's saying I can do CD / and it moves up one, and it moves up one again. So it's not cd ... which is what I was trying to do. So yeah, I always forget these things. And delete will also delete directories. So let's have a look. So delete, let's delete the dir2 directory, and it's gone. There we go. So it deletes directories too. And you can delete files. Yeah. There we go. So I think I'll leave the video there for now because it's probably getting quite long. But the next chapter goes into working with disks. You can format disks, setting the clock, opening new shells, and then various other things, pattern matching and other types of things. But I think that's all the basics there. That will allow you to like set up paths, make folders, make files, delete folders. So really, yeah, it's dir, list, info, type is quite useful. Make dir is MakeDir, and we didn't actually make a file because it doesn't really have a concept of that, but we were copying files from other places. So yeah, so that's just my quick refresher, mostly for my own interest, but that's my quick refresher on it. I'm just going through the using the Amiga Workbench manual, which came with an Amiga 600, I think. So yeah, just a quick refresher, because whenever I'm using the shell, I'm always trying to use. Basically, I've been using Windows for much longer than I've been using the Amiga now, and all this kind of stuff you just kind of forget. But AmigaDOS is really good, and it's really easy to use. So, and it can be quite useful for doing little things like that. So, yeah, I think it is probably, you know, worth reading through your manual every now and again. It's good that when computers used to come with manuals like this, the amount of information in here is really in depth. So, you know, this covers all how to use the workbench and everything. So it's actually quite a good manual, but you can see why people were daunted by computers back in the day. It's like, here's your new Amiga, and here is the, how many pages is this manual? I don't think they even listed the pages because there's too many. But looks like 300 or 400 pages or something like that. So huge manual to use the Amiga, but it's quite intuitive once you're getting into it. So that's just my quick little refresher on using the shell, and hopefully I won't forget this stuff, because like I said, most of us don't use our Amigas, you know, for our work every day. We're using different computers nowadays, so having a little refresher sometimes is quite good.